Oh, I've never questioned my path. I've never gotten. I just kind of literally fall into things. I've always loved to travel and in kind of different places and weird places. If you're working on carpentry, you make like 3 or 4 times what you normally do as in any university job. And I didn't have money, so I was staying on her farm in Vermont. And then I found all these books signed by these people. So once I had to run after a jet plane on Curacao.
So hi, hearty welcome, sir.
Thank
so
you.
It's been an honor for Article 19 to do this interview.
I think it had a huge influence because although the particular school as a system, this was Delhi Public School in Delhi in Mathura Road, which is notorious. So although that actually had this idea of branding classes as being a headache, like in our case Section A, but I think we had sort of three teachers who saw it differently and actually tried to, in some sense, in a sort of distinct, in a very succinct way, gave us a kind of experiential, experimental space, which brought back a kind of a agency to students to experiment on particular parts which would otherwise they would be seen as failures in. So in my own case, although I was sort of good at drawing and was really interested in physics, and had my own chemistry lab at home, I had also a small physics lab at home, which I just made myself. Because officially we were not doing well in those subjects, so we were cut off from the school labs. So, but that didn't stop us from working among ourselves and also with our friends to create our own spaces of experimentation. And I think that's what these three teachers did, where they kind of saw that as an important space. And then, as it turned out, which was like many years later, I mean, like 20 years later, when we all met up in Delhi again, it turned out that our quote-unquote academic results in the All India Higher Secondary Board exam, those were the best ever for any science class for 30 years. So it was 30 years after that we met. And that came out in a court case where one of the teachers took the school to court. And that was the evidence. So our class became the evidence. So that's what we knew. But it didn't really, that wasn't a kind of concern with us. That wasn't the driving force. So I think it was teachers who gave space. That's the important point. And a kind of agency in the way they developed a kind of pedagogy which reinforced agency. I think if I sort of went around the bush a bit, but I think if you think about what is it that they did, they actually worked the material on our terms, stuff that we felt was we were failures in, and kind of built our agency in those on a non-competitive terms. I think that was the other thing. They broke down competition. I think the main person was B. Das, who was teaching us English. Then there was Dr. Verma. He was called Dr. Verma because he had come from the US and he had a doctorate. And then there was Lobo, who was a class teacher. So I think the three of them worked together to work with our class in particular. So I was failing, okay, in maths. I think physics too I failed, chemistry I certainly failed, and I was doing well in technical drawing. That was my savior. And but by the time I finished, I think if I remember correct, I had distinctions in all of these. And the thing, it wasn't sort of getting the distinction, but basically I think we were out to prove to the student, to the school, that we could be different. So it's a bit like a movie kind of situation without any romance. So when I entered architecture, I was a kind of design type. So I hated politics. I hated cities. I don't know why people were living in cities. So there's a huge irony there. And but as I kind of went through the 4 years of architecture, I think I changed drastically because I got very deeply involved in energy studies. I was interested in that. We did a couple of research projects. I mean, a major research project we were part of, which was looking at passive cooling in Jaisalmer in June. So we actually did temperature managements and temperature recordings, which then got published by the professor who had taken us there, Vinod Gupta, who got a book out on that. And I think that's it's considered quite a major book on energy. And but it was very experiential because we were going to various kinds of housing and settlement types in Jaisalmer in June. And recently, like 6 months ago or 4 months ago, one of our friends, he got a letter. He found a postcard and a letter from one of the people's whose house, and a very small house, whom he had hosted, because we had to do these temperature recordings on a 24-hour basis. And he remembered us, I mean, obviously, like us as college kids. But that is something nice, that to think about, that people who house you visited like 30 years ago, this guy Chandra Prakash, he suddenly writes this postcard and was talking about all of us. So in a sense, architecture in that sense was fairly social sciencey, because we would go to, say, villages in the Himalayas and interview people, look at their build form, how they built, how did things come, how did things come together. And in some sense, there was, when we were doing architecture, we were doing actually hell of a lot more field work, and this was in large part paid by the government of India, because they paid for our field trips, whether it was short ones to the Himalayas, because the Himalayas is close to Delhi. It's like literally an overnight or one-day journey, but also to other parts of India, whether it was in Sikkim or to South India, because that's the first time I came to South India when I was in the third year. And I think that kind of public support for learning in an experiential basis, that is extremely important, because it's also, you are going to new places, new food, new kind of people, that you're meeting. So I think that kind of paved the ground for me to then get into MIT through the Inlax Foundation. And I had no idea that I was going to the US like till 3 months before I landed up there. And then I found that the person I was supposed to meet with, he was on sabbatical, and this was before the internet in a sense. So you didn't know that someone was going to be on sabbatical till you landed up. So I started to work with another Dutch professor, John Habraken. That also, his group was interdisciplinary, because there were people from computer science, because at that time they were experimenting with embedded software, which then becomes a precursor to AI. And so I partly got interested in that, because the way of a particular kind of spatial logic applied to chip design and software is not at a conceptual level different from how my particular focus, because of my I'd got into trekking in a big way. So I started to look at settlements in the difference in commonalities in settlements between Dras and Kargil in the Leh area. And because one is in Kargil, it's Shia Muslim, and there's a particular kind of settlement form, versus Dras, which is both Ladakhi Muslim and Ladakhi Buddhist, few Coptic Christians also. And the settlement form is, because the climatic reason is the same, it has to be the same. But then what changes because of different forms of religiosity which contain sacredness in different ways. So yeah, so I think that sort of then moved me on to looking at I fell into kind of industrial cluster kind of studies, partly because I was interested in small manufacturing, which also came from I was doing things on my own, because one of the things in architecture is that we do carpentry. So I was doing carpentry, and also to make money, because I didn't take a loan for my time there. So if you're working on carpentry, you make like 3 or 4 times what you normally do as in any university job. And then I was doing photography. So at that time, we used to, which again came from architecture in Delhi, we used to do our own developing printing, and then, so you develop the film yourself. And at one point, I tried color developing, which is a crazy kind of thing, because temperature controls are really tough over there. But it was, I think, working with craft then got me to thinking about the built form, how it was kind of evolved. So my master's thesis was actually a refugee housing area in Delhi, which had evolved from the 50s to 85, where people had taken control over their built environment, and they were kind of adding rooms and adding workshops, and that got into in an experiential way thinking about how economy is embedded in society, and it has a direct material influence in terms of things getting built up, and there's no one particular chief designer or chief architect type of figure. So that questioned a lot of conventional thinking of mainstream architecture, where there is this Harvard Roque type of fountainhead type of a figure of the major or Corbusier, and to completely demolish those ideas. And so that, I think, really built the basis that entry into economy as being embedded in society, that then got me interested in land development in a very experiential way, which then became the basis for my PhD work. So one of the good things at MIT, and I don't know if that's still true, but at least in the early 80s, mid 80s, you kind of were encouraged, but there was great possibility to work across disciplines. There was a lot of openness, and also faculty, and that's the other important thing. So all the faculty I worked with, anthropologist who was my chair in my committee, a planner lawyer who was in my committee, he was from Harvard University. And then, so that my chair was Lisa P.T., who had come from a family of, they were really her father was Robert Redfield, and her grandfather was Robert Park of the Urban Ecology Group. Now, all this I didn't know till I was doing my compre exams, and then I found that the literature that I was reading with, and I didn't have money, so I was staying on her farm in Vermont. And then I found all these books signed by these people. So I thought there was a collector, and I didn't realize that actually there was this eerie kind of ghostly lineage of the people whom I was studying for my exam, but who happened to be occupying that same room where I was doing all of this studying. So it felt as if their ghosts were kind of floating around me. And her work, interestingly, countered both her father's and grandfather's work as an anthropologist. So so it wasn't that she was just towing the line. And the same thing went with the economist whom I was working with, who's from the economics department, Jerome Rothenberg, who was the spatial economics. But all of these people were deeply involved in various kind of housing and land crises that were happening in the Boston, Cambridge area at that time. So it was a direct entry into the interface between urban studies, urban planning, and politics. That line was non-existent. So that actually became really important, and also through Bill Dobell, who was at Harvard, who was quite central to understanding land markets, but in an experiential way. And I think it was because of their own work in mainly Latin America that they encouraged me to explore these things in a ground up way in my particular sites in East Delhi. And I think that sort of laid the ground then for my sort of future work in looking at land politics, which then got me into. By then we had moved to Bangalore, and then I got into the University of Toronto's political science department. So yeah, so I've been shifting fields quite a bit, including teaching the National Law School with on law and development, because there was no course like that, and so we were kind of anchoring that in the early 2000s. Oh, I've never questioned my path. I've never gotten. I just kind of literally fall into things, and I don't mind that. And things are constantly evolving. So I don't think so that's ever been there, or nor has there been a kind of anxiety about that. I think one thing is that if you're constantly exploring a kind of a material and a space or an associated space, then that question doesn't arise, because you're always exploring different facets of a particular kind of space that you're working within, and that lends itself to being interdisciplinary also, which I think is essential in the social sciences and humanities. So whether you're looking at how films enter into your own exploration of a particular life experience, you don't differentiate between films and say a kind of sociology of a place or a geography of a place. I mean, they're informing each other. And I think one, just to make one more point, I think the Sarai program in CSDS, which started essentially in 1998, that was extremely unique and foundational for many of us who were kind of urbanists coming together in the late 90s. And we are coming from different parts. I was coming from Bangalore, so people from Bombay, groups from Calcutta, a couple of people I sort of had met there, and a bigger group in Delhi. So I think the Sarai program really anchored this kind of exploration. Yeah, I think definitely. I think my PhD advisor, Lisa PT, was definitely a huge influence. And among other faculty, I think John Habraken, and then also in the art world, because I was also painting. I've been painting for a long time. I mean, now it's replaced with a greater interest in ceramic pottery, ceramic art. But there's this person called Nikolai Roerich, who was a kind of a 19th, 20th century explorer in the larger Himalayan region, where he would also be making his own paints out of minerals, and does this kind of a pastel kind of fresco kind of artwork. So I liked his work, because also I had trekked in those areas both in the lower Himalayas and then beyond the Great Himalayan ranges into Ladakh, touching Zanskar. And that's where Roerich was also working. But when I started to read about his life, about how he saw that region, I think that became so Roerich is definitely one influence. But yeah, and academically, I think in a sense, Lisa PT has remained quite a central figure. Partly because she also didn't assume certain boundaries. So she came from a family where all of them were, or rather, two daughters were very involved in the theatre movement in Vermont, the bread and puppet theatre. So, and I sort of was, lucky to witness that on a first-hand basis with them. But she was also a person who, if there was free time, we would go into hardware stores, and she'll talk about particular tools and the various kind of carpentry. So when I was in Vermont, like whenever I was studying for my compre exam, I had to do something with my hands. So I was of course helping her children, who were much older than me, to fix up that farmhouse. It was the old wooden house with 200 years old and partly 150 years, with a slate roof, and which was collapsing. So we had to kind of jack it up with hydraulic jacks. But then I also built one small bridge over a stream, which was my other project going on, which is the carpentry thing. So there was, and then when you're on a farm, and especially North America, you're basically alone. So I was alone with the dog sometime on 2 weeks on end. And then when you suddenly meet people, you find it very strange. It's also much colder than Boston, so your body gets completely different. So that and being on a farm was a great way to sort of study your literature, because there's no distraction. So I think people who opened up a particular experiential space, I think that's what is common to people who influence me. Home is, I don't know, I think home is where I have a sort of trip in life. So I think partly coming out of a ethnicity which didn't have a sort of I was brought up in Delhi, but my parents' kind of relatives were all from Bombay and Pune, whom we occasionally visited, or they would visit us. So there was never a definitive kind of home. It was always somewhere else, but there wasn't an anxiety about not having a home, in a sense. So I think there was a lot of sort of interest in going to new places, traveling, discovering, and also somehow settling down there, but then not in a fixed way. I think it's always you're settling in a place you're kind of exploring different places, and that's continued on and on. So I've always loved to travel, and in kind of different places and weird places, and been quite at home there, discovering home there. And it's been a lot of fun. I mean, there's a lot of crazy times. Like I think once I had to run after a jet plane on Curacao island in the Caribbean, because we literally missed our flight and we got it wrong. So that was fun. Like, it sounds a bit crazy, running on the runway and stopping it with a handkerchief, but there are crazy moments like that. But there's always been experiences that keep you alive, like fun and crazy experiences. So even when you're teaching, you're not teaching, and it's not a one-way street. It's always a two-way thing. When you're on the field, then you're basically equal. Okay, there's no real hierarchy, because the learning is experiential. He wanted to put up his hand, which he did, and said that I feel the whole place should be demolished.